How did 2023 deal with the biopic? Biopics have existed nearly as long as movies themselves, and have always been a majorly popular genre, winning awards and having lucrative box office success. But first, what is a biopic? Many definitions describe the biopic as a film that dramatises the life of a particular person, typically a public or historical figure. In recent times, the Hollywood biopic machine has ramped up drastically, and 2023 has been no different, with the release of Napoleon, Priscilla, Maestro, Oppenheimer, and Ferrari. The biopic genre, however, in recent times has often been a heavily criticised genre for a number of reasons that I find myself often agreeing with. And so today I want to look at how 2023 dealt with the biopic genre and the criticisms facing it. Criticisms such as narrative structure, historical accuracy, redundancy, and repetitiveness.
You think you're so great because you have boats!
Napoleon aims to tell the story of Napoleon Bonaparte, from officer to emperor to exile. And I think that's one of the film's biggest problems, and introduces us to our first problem with the biopic: narrative structure.
Infantry advance!
Or if you want to put it, the greatest hits montage. Many biopics attempt to tell the whole story of their chosen person, from nobody to star to death. And while this seems like there is some sense to it, it often results in the film frantically jumping from location to location, from event to event, from character to character, to make sure the film's not missing anything, while simultaneously missing many key points by not telling these events in enough detail. It also results in the film not having one key point to focus on, and often makes the film feel more of a Wikipedia page retelling than an actual story. It's always going to be a tall ask to tell the whole of Napoleon's life, given how much is known about Napoleon. And in attempting to tell Napoleon's life over 28 years from 1793 to 1821, we as the audience never get a true sense of who Napoleon was. The film never takes the time to sit with Napoleon and through detailed writing and filmmaking, analyse what made him one of the most fascinating people to ever live, because the film was too busy trying to tick off every event in his life. That's why I believe most biopics are better, and a Napoleon movie would be better if they stripped the film down and told it through one or two periods of that person's life, which allows the filmmakers space and freedom to tell the story in greater detail. For example, one of the better scenes of Napoleon is its last, when Napoleon is exiled on the island of St. Helena.
And who burnt Moscow to the ground?
I don't know, sir.
I did.
I believe, sir, the Russians burnt it to get rid of the French.
Who told you that?
It's common knowledge, sir.
Because you can clearly see Napoleon's motivation of wanting to be remembered and his ambition. So to pitch a better Napoleon movie, it would take place fully on the island of St. Helena, showing a tortured, broken Napoleon trying to control his roaring ambition that made him great in the first place. And as his life drifts away, Napoleon tells his triumphant stories of his past to anyone who will listen, which could be shown through flashbacks. This format not only gives the filmmakers freedom and space to analyse Napoleon, but also dances around historical accuracy problems, because these flashbacks don't have to be 100% true, because it's only as Napoleon remembered it. The film that does the format of telling one or two periods of that person's life quite well is Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs is mainly told through 3 separate press conferences of Steve Jobs' life. With the directing of Danny Boyle and the writing of Aaron Sorkin, the film gives a detailed profile of who Steve Jobs was, without having to span across every event of his life, and allowing the audience to fill in the gaps between the press conferences to figure out what made Steve Jobs, Steve Jobs.
You protect his blind side. When you look at him, you think of me.
Another issue of biopics is historical accuracy. It's absolutely impossible to tell a 100% true story, as there's always going to be inaccuracies, and therefore raises ethical questions about the portrayal of real people. Is it fair to portray real people? Is it fair to portray real people negatively without proper evidence or truth? One such example is The Blind Side, which depicts African-American football player Michael Oher, who in the film is adopted by the Tui family and saved from poverty. However, in August of 2023, 12 years after the film was released, Oher filed a lawsuit claiming that he was never adopted, as the film suggested, but rather was tricked into signing a conservatorship, which allowed the Tui family to make business deals in his name. Michael Oher said in an interview that the biggest thing for him was being portrayed as not being able to read or write. When you go into a locker room and your teammates don't think you can learn a playbook, that weighs heavy. If you want to delve into more about the case, there's a great video by Legal Eagle that explores everything about the case. Cases like this one and others ultimately raise the question: is foregoing truth a sacrifice you have to make to tell entertaining stories? It's a complicated question and one I can't really answer right now, but I do want to look at how Priscilla deals with that problem. Priscilla is based on Priscilla Presley's 1985 memoir, Elvis and Me, and Priscilla Presley is also an executive producer on the film. And while this isn't evidence to say the film was 100% historically true, it is decent evidence to say this is Priscilla's point of view of what happened with her time with Elvis Presley. This leaves Priscilla with an aura of authenticity to it, an authenticity that Baz Luhrmann's Elvis didn't have, as his film didn't contact anyone connected to Elvis Presley or Priscilla. Priscilla also excels in creating a sense that the film is peeking behind the curtain. Biopics often tell the stories of the world's most publicised figures, which is understandable, they're the most popular. However, this often leaves a film feeling as though it never really delved behind the scenes. We, the audience, never really got to see anything we haven't seen before. And this is where the feeling of peeking behind the curtain comes into play. One common way of doing this is telling the story through the eyes of another character. A film that effectively does this is The Social Network, telling the story of Mark Zuckerberg through his friend Eduardo Saverin, revealing what it would be like to be a friend to Mark Zuckerberg, but also revealing the harshness of the business world. While Priscilla is Priscilla Presley's story, looking through her eyes we see a side of Elvis that wasn't really shown to the public, and notably wasn't shown in Elvis. Priscilla unapologetically portrays Elvis, and directly confronts their problematic relationship and age gap in ways that Elvis largely ignores. And that's not to say Elvis is bad, I think there is a place for these films to celebrate these great people, but Priscilla leaves you with a lasting impression of who Elvis actually was. I did want to mention Priscilla's place in sort of the sad girl biopic trend of recent years, with films such as Spencer and Blonde coming out. These films typically explore high-profile women tortured and haunted by their restricting fame. Criticisms arose to these films for historical accuracy, but also not celebrating what made these women so great, instead treating them awful in the film's runtime. And while I haven't fully gathered my thoughts on this topic, there is a great video that you can check out by Broey Deschanel that fully delves into the topic.
Maestro.
Maestro.
Maestro kind of feels like the greatest hits format without the greatest hits. That might sound harsh considering Leonard Bernstein is a legendary composer, but when the film ended, I never felt that I learned anything substantial about Leonard Bernstein. Now if that's what you want to call Oscar bait, then sure. But often with biopics, I never get a true sense of what made that person so great. Why are they so special? Sure, they can sing great, they can perform great, they can write great, but why? But how? Excellent biopics takes us inside the mind of the person they're depicting and helps us answer these questions. Sure, Bradley Cooper can conduct authentically and Austin Butler can sing very well, but why? But how? And it was only with one of the last scenes of Maestro that the film sort of delves into this idea. And Leonard Bernstein effortlessly teaches a student on how to conduct an orchestra. Now on to Oppenheimer.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Ironically, one of the best lines in Oppenheimer should have been in Maestro.
The important thing isn't can you read music, it's can you hear it. Can you hear the music, Robert?
Yes, I can.
This line and the following montage effectively show what made Oppenheimer so great. And as it cuts to different practical effects, it effectively shows how Oppenheimer viewed the world and science, and allows us, the audience, to get inside his head. Oppenheimer really is a miracle among biopics. Its ability to tell so many stories simultaneously is remarkable, considering the failures of the movies listed previous. With long unbroken shots of Oppenheimer and showcasing his emotions and Cillian Murphy's acting, it allows us to fully emotionally connect with him and what he's feeling, which is something that Napoleon lacked. Before I finish, I did want to mention Ferrari, which for me is one of the most underrated movies of the year.
Races at you. You have perhaps a crisis of identity. Am I a sportsman or a competitor?
It focuses on one specific period of Enzo Ferrari's life, and represents a very solid view of who Enzo Ferrari was. The film shows Enzo Ferrari balancing his personal life with his love for cars and his brand and family name, Ferrari. And it represents a side of biopics, and I guess more broadly true story films, that is quite effective. Common amongst lesser known figures, these films effectively create shock and surprise of what depicts in front of them. The films that effectively did it this year is The Iron Claw and Killers of the Flower Moon, which admittedly is much harder to do with figures such as Napoleon and Elvis that are known so prevalently. These films create a sense that they have a responsibility to shine light on the world's most important and unseen stories, and leaves the audience leaving with something they didn't know before, while also simultaneously creating a human message that applies to everyone. So that about wraps it up for 2023. Oh, I did want to mention films I didn't mention in this video that were also very good, like Blackberry and The Iron Claw. I did want to make a final point on fiction versus non-fiction. Well, 100% reasons to tell true stories and biopics, as some of the most memorable films are true stories. To use an example of Todd Field's Tar, which is a fiction story about a conductor called Lydia Tarr, and it's a profile on how complicated and complex her life is and who she is as a person. And at the end of the film, there is still so much to be discovered about who that person was, but not by a Wikipedia page, which would ultimately leave you disappointed, as so many biopics do. Having said this though, many biopics can create this sense of discovery that can't be answered. These tend to be biopics that delve in speculation and subjectiveness. But yeah, the biopic train doesn't look like it's stopping. We've got a Bob Dylan biopic coming out with Timothée Chalamet, an Amy Winehouse biopic coming out, and a Bob Marley biopic coming out. So yeah, thanks for watching, and these are my opinions and in no ways facts, so let me know what you think in the comments. I'd be happy to hear it. Also got some links in the descriptions of some great videos I watched in preparation for this video to delve into much of the topics I talked about today. So yeah, cheers, thanks for watching.